Let go of her. Gideon Ashford's voice thundered through the entrance hall. His wife froze halfway across the marble floor. One of Celeste's hands was twisted into the back of Amara Quinn's uniform, while the other gripped the black maid's wrist so tightly that her fingernails had broken the skin. Amara's shoes dragged beneath her as Celeste pulled her toward the service exit. A black sedan waited outside with its rear door open. Gideon had returned from Singapore 3 days early. No announcement. No driver. No warning. And judging by the terror on Amara's face, he had arrived just in time. Celeste released her and immediately straightened her silk dress. Gideon, you've misunderstood. Then help me understand why you were dragging an employee out of my house. She was stealing from us. Amara shook her head. I didn't steal anything. Be quiet. Celeste snapped. Before we discover what Amara found inside the mansion, subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because sometimes the person being thrown out is the only person brave enough to tell the truth. Gideon stepped between the two women. At 41, he had built Ashford Maritime into a multi-billion-dollar empire, but inside his own mansion, he had allowed Celeste to control nearly everything. She hired the staff, managed the household accounts, and insisted that he avoid minor domestic problems. Now he understood why. What did she supposedly steal? He asked. Celeste pointed toward Amara's apron. Search her pocket. Amara instinctively covered it with her hand. That movement hardened Gideon's expression. Amara, he said calmly, show me. Her eyes filled with tears. Sir, what's inside does belong to your family, but your wife never wanted you to see it. Celeste lunged forward, but Gideon blocked her. Amara slowly reached into her apron and removed a silver hearing aid. Gideon stared at it. A tiny blue flower had been painted beside the battery compartment. His face lost its color. My mother wore this. Celeste gave a sharp laugh. His mother owned several. Amara probably found it in storage and planned to sell it. Gideon didn't answer. He remembered painting that blue flower himself when he was 14 so his mother, Evelyn, could distinguish her hearing aid from his grandmother's. Evelyn had disappeared from his life 11 months earlier after sending a brief message saying she wanted no further contact. No calls. No visits. No explanation. Gideon had believed she was punishing him for marrying Celeste. Where did you find this? He asked. Amara glanced at Celeste. In the laundry delivered from Ashcroft House. Celeste's confidence flickered. Ashcroft House was an isolated family property nearly 80 miles north of the city. Gideon had not visited it in years. Celeste claimed the building was empty and undergoing repairs. Why would laundry come from an empty house? Gideon asked. It didn't, Celeste replied quickly. She's lying. Amara's breathing became uneven. Yesterday, Mrs. Ashford ordered me to wash 6 women's nightgowns separately. One had blood on the sleeve. This hearing aid was tangled inside it. It was rust, Celeste said. Not blood. You told me never to mention the clothes, Amara continued. Then a driver arrived this morning and asked whether I had found the silver device. When I said no, he searched the laundry room. Gideon turned to Celeste. Who is living at Ashcroft House? No one. Then give me the keys. They're with the caretaker. The caretaker died 2 years ago. Silence swallowed the room. Celeste's eyes moved toward the open sedan. The driver behind the wheel lowered his face, but Gideon recognized him as Victor Dane, a man Celeste had introduced as a private security consultant. Why is Victor waiting? Gideon asked. Celeste folded her arms. I dismissed Amara. He was taking her home. With no luggage. Amara looked at Gideon. He wasn't taking me home. Victor suddenly started the sedan. Gideon rushed outside, but the car shot down the circular driveway and disappeared beyond the iron gates. When he returned, Celeste was walking toward the staircase. Stop, he ordered. She turned slowly. You're choosing a maid's ridiculous story over your wife. I'm choosing the evidence in my hand. Celeste's expression softened. She approached him and lowered her voice. Your mother abandoned you, Gideon. You spent months trying to reach her. Don't let this woman reopen that wound because she wants money. Amara flinched, but she remained standing. I don't want his money, she said. I wanted to know whether the woman wearing those nightgowns was safe. And how would you know anything about her? Celeste challenged. Amara hesitated before pulling up her sleeve. Written across her forearm in trembling blue ink were 4 words. Gideon doesn't know I'm here. Gideon read them twice. The message was inside one nightgown, Amara explained. Someone wrote it on the fabric. I copied it before Mrs. Ashford burned the gown. Celeste slapped Amara hard across the face. Gideon caught his wife's wrist before she could strike again. The softness vanished from Celeste's expression. You have no idea what you're interfering with, she whispered. A deep vibration suddenly came from inside Amara's shoe. She stepped back, removed a tiny phone, and looked at its illuminated screen. I hid this when your wife tried to take it, she told Gideon. The number has called 7 times. Celeste went pale. The phone rang again. Gideon pressed the answer button and activated the speaker. For several seconds, there was only labored breathing. Then an elderly woman whispered through the static. Amara, did you reach my son? Gideon's knees nearly failed him. Mother. The line went silent. Then a man's voice spoke in the background. She contacted him. Move her tonight. A struggle followed, the phone struck something hard, and the call ended. Gideon stared at Celeste. She was no longer beside the staircase. The front doors stood open, and she was gone. Gideon ran through the open doors, but Celeste had vanished. Her sports car was still parked beside the fountain. The black sedan had already left, and the iron gates were closing automatically. Someone had activated the estate security system from a remote device. Gideon pulled out his phone. No signal. Mrs. Ashford installed a blocker last month, Amara said. She claimed reporters were flying drones near the mansion. A metallic click echoed behind them. Every exterior door locked at once. Gideon looked toward the security cameras. Their red lights had disappeared. Celeste had not simply fled. She had blinded the house and trapped them inside. Is there another way out? He asked. The old delivery tunnel beneath the kitchen. They hurried through the silent mansion. Amara's cheek was swollen where Celeste had struck her, yet she kept moving without complaint. As they entered the kitchen, the smell of gas stopped her. Don't touch the lights, she warned. A low hiss came from the industrial stove. All 6 burners had been opened without flames. Gideon covered his nose. She's trying to delay us. No, Amara whispered. She's trying to make sure we never leave. Amara grabbed 2 wet towels while Gideon closed the gas valves. They crossed the kitchen and reached the pantry, where an iron shelf concealed the entrance to a narrow underground passage. Before entering, Gideon looked back at the home he had trusted Celeste to manage. How long has she treated you this way? Amara paused. Long enough to know that today wasn't the first time she made someone disappear. The tunnel ended beyond the garden wall. Gideon's phone regained its signal immediately. He called the police, reported Evelyn's possible abduction, and gave them Ashcroft House's location. The dispatcher promised to send officers, but the property was more than an hour away. Celeste heard that call, Amara said. She knows we found her. Gideon opened a transportation app, but Amara shook her head. Any driver connected to your account can be tracked. Mrs. Ashford monitors your movements. You sound as though you've been investigating her. I have, since I found my father's name in her desk. Gideon stared at her. Before Amara could explain, headlights appeared on the service road. A battered green truck stopped beside them. The driver was Bernard Cole, the mansion's 68-year-old gardener. I saw Mrs. Ashford running toward the east gate, Bernard said. Figured trouble had finally caught up with her. Gideon and Amara climbed inside. As Bernard drove north, Gideon contacted his company's aviation director and ordered a helicopter to meet them at a private field. He also instructed his legal team to freeze Celeste's access to the corporate aircraft, estate vehicles, and household accounts. Then he turned toward Amara. Tell me about your father. Amara looked through the window. Elias Quinn worked at Ashford Harbour for 19 years. He repaired navigation equipment on your family's ships. Gideon remembered the name. 12 years ago, my brother Julian died when his boat struck the rocks near Blackwater Point. Your father was operating the harbour signal that night. The investigation blamed him, Amara said. They claimed he turned off the warning beacon because he was drunk. He disappeared before the hearing. He didn't disappear. He came home injured and terrified. 2 days later, someone drove his truck off a bridge with him inside. Gideon's throat tightened. He had been told Elias fled after causing Julian's death. The abandoned truck had never been mentioned. My mother spent years trying to clear his name, Amara continued. She died before she could. When Mrs. Ashford offered me a position at your mansion, I accepted because I recognized her maiden name. Celeste knew Julian. She was on his boat. Gideon went still. Celeste had always claimed she met the Ashford family at a charity event 8 years after Julian's death. If Amara was right, his entire marriage had begun with a lie. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I had no proof, and Mrs. Ashford never allowed me alone with you. Every time you returned home, she changed my schedule. Gideon remembered dozens of small incidents he had dismissed, staff members resigning without notice, unanswered calls from Evelyn, and Celeste insisting that his mother was becoming unstable. The helicopter was waiting when they reached the field. During the flight, Gideon examined the silver hearing aid. A dark substance had dried inside the battery compartment. Amara used a hairpin to remove a tightly folded scrap of plastic. It was part of a medication label. Evelyn Ashford. Patient 17. Bellwether Recovery Services. Gideon searched the company on his phone. No website. No registered clinic. Amara pointed toward the tiny emblem beside the name, a bell surrounded by thorns. I saw that symbol on Victor's jacket. Gideon sent the information to the police. Minutes later, his attorney called with another discovery. Bellwether Recovery Services had received monthly payments from a private foundation controlled by Celeste. Each payment was listed as elderly residential care. The helicopter landed in a field behind Ashcroft House. Police vehicles had not yet arrived. The mansion stood beneath a darkening sky, its windows covered from the inside. One upstairs curtain moved. Someone's watching, Amara said. Gideon told the pilot to remain ready. Then he and Amara approached the rear entrance. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and damp wood. Plastic sheets covered the furniture. Medical supply boxes lined the corridor, but every label had been removed. A wheelchair sat beside the staircase, one wheel still turning. "Mother!" Gideon shouted. A faint knocking answered from above. They followed the sound to a bedroom secured with a keypad. Gideon rammed his shoulder against it, but the reinforced door barely moved. Amara noticed pale scratches around 4 numbers. "Someone inside has been trying to enter the code," she said. She tested the worn digits in different sequences. On the 4th attempt, the lock released. The room was empty. A metal cup lay on the floor. Restraint straps hung from the bed. The knocking had come from a small speaker hidden behind the curtain, a recording designed to lure them upstairs. Suddenly, the bedroom door slammed shut. White vapor poured through the ventilation grill. Gideon grabbed the handle, but it would not turn. "Sedative gas," Amara said, coughing. She wrapped a blanket around her fist and struck the window. The thick glass cracked but did not break. Gideon lifted the metal bed frame and drove it into the same point. On the 3rd strike, the window shattered. Cold air rushed inside. They climbed onto a narrow roof ledge just as the room disappeared behind the vapor. Gideon helped Amara reach a drainage ladder. Below them, an engine started. A medical van emerged from behind the house. Through its rear window, Gideon saw an elderly woman pounding weakly against the glass. "Mother!" Amara descended first. Gideon followed, but by the time they reached the ground, the van was racing toward the forest road. The helicopter pilot saw it and lifted off without waiting for instructions. Gideon and Amara ran toward Bernard's truck, which the pilot had arranged to be delivered from the field. Gideon drove while the helicopter followed the van from above. For 6 miles, the road twisted through dense woodland. Then the pilot called. The van stopped beneath an old railway bridge. I can't see it anymore. When Gideon arrived, the vehicle stood abandoned with its rear doors open. Blood marked the floor. Amara found a trail leading beneath the bridge. Gideon followed it until he heard a woman gasping nearby. Evelyn Ashford lay behind a concrete pillar, alive but barely conscious. Gideon dropped beside her. "Mother, it's me." Her trembling hand touched his face. "She told me you wanted me locked away. I never knew." Evelyn looked past him and saw Amara. Her expression changed from relief to recognition. "Elias's daughter," she whispered. Amara knelt beside her. "You knew my father. He saved my life the night Julian died." Sirens approached in the distance, but Evelyn gripped Gideon's sleeve with surprising strength. "Listen to me. Celeste didn't imprison me because of your money. She was afraid I would tell you what happened on that boat." "What happened?" Tears entered Evelyn's eyes. Julian discovered who Celeste really was. She pushed him into the water, and when Elias tried to save him, Victor attacked them both. Amara covered her mouth. Evelyn reached toward the silver hearing aid. "Your father hid proof before he died," she told Amara. "Celeste married Gideon because she believed the Ashford family had it." "Where is it?" Gideon asked. Evelyn's gaze shifted toward the trees. "She thinks Amara's mother gave it to her." A gunshot cracked through the forest. The concrete beside Amara's head exploded, and Victor's voice called from the darkness. "Send Elias Quinn's daughter out alone, or the next bullet won't miss." "Don't move," Gideon whispered. Amara remained behind the concrete pillar as another bullet struck the bridge. Evelyn lay between them, too weak to run. The approaching sirens were close, but Victor had chosen a position deep in the trees where he could see the road. "You have 10 seconds, he shouted. "Send Amara out." Evelyn grabbed Amara's hand. "He believes Elias gave your mother the harbor recording." "What recording?" Amara asked. The navigation system captured every radio transmission from Julian's boat. Elias removed its memory cylinder before Victor reached him. Gideon took off his jacket and wrapped it around a fallen branch. He slowly raised it above the pillar. A shot tore through the fabric. The flash revealed Victor's location beside a dead pine tree. Gideon immediately called the police and quietly described the position. The dispatcher ordered them to remain hidden. Victor shouted again. 5 seconds. Amara noticed the abandoned van 20 feet away. Its front passenger door remained open, and the keys were still in the ignition. "I can reach it," she whispered. "No," Gideon said. "He wants me alive. Otherwise, he wouldn't be negotiating. That doesn't make you safe. It makes me our best chance." Before Gideon could stop her, Amara stood with both hands raised. "I'm coming out." "Amara." Gideon hissed. She stepped into the open. Victor emerged from the trees, keeping his weapon trained on her. "Walk toward the van." Amara obeyed, but instead of approaching the passenger side, she moved behind the vehicle. "Stop," Victor ordered. She suddenly dropped to the ground and kicked a stone beneath the van. It struck the rear wheel. The helicopter pilot understood her signal. The aircraft descended rapidly above the bridge, throwing dirt, leaves, and broken branches into Victor's face. He turned away from the violent wind. Amara crawled beneath the van as Gideon covered Evelyn with his body. Police officers rushed from both sides of the road. Victor fired blindly before an officer tackled him. His weapon slid across the pavement. Within seconds, he was handcuffed, but he began laughing. "You're too late," he told Gideon. "Celeste already knows where Elias hid it." Amara crawled from beneath the van. "My father never told me." Victor looked directly at her. "Your mother did." The smile disappeared from Amara's face. "My mother died 4 years ago. After Celeste visited her in hospice." Amara remembered a blonde volunteer who had spent hours beside her mother during her final week. At the time, Amara had been grateful that a stranger cared enough to sit with a dying woman. That stranger had been Celeste. Paramedics placed Evelyn inside an ambulance. Gideon wanted to accompany her, but she refused to release Amara's hand. "Your mother didn't give Celeste the location," Evelyn said. "She gave her a false one." "How do you know?" "Because she told me where Elias actually put it." Evelyn struggled for breath. The old harbor clock. Gideon knew it immediately. For almost a century, a 12-foot mechanical clock had stood inside Ashford Maritime's private museum. It had been removed from the original harbor station after Julian's death. "Where inside the clock?" Amara asked. Evelyn closed her eyes. "North light, blinks twice." Her hand fell away. The paramedics assured them she was still breathing, but she needed urgent treatment. As the ambulance departed, Gideon instructed the police to guard her room. Victor was placed in a patrol car. Before the door closed, he leaned toward the window. "Ask your gardener why Celeste let him live." Gideon immediately called Bernard. No answer. He tried again. The call connected, but instead of Bernard, Celeste spoke. "I was beginning to think you'd forgotten me." "Where is Bernard?" "With me. For the moment." A muffled groan came through the phone. "If you hurt him." "You'll do what?" "Freeze another account." Celeste laughed. "Bring Amara to the Maritime Museum. No police, no helicopter, and no clever signals. You said you wanted the recording. Amara is the only person who can identify it." "I don't know what it looks like," Amara called. "You have your father's eyes," Celeste replied. "You'll recognize his mark." The call ended. Gideon looked at the officers surrounding Victor's vehicle. "We tell the police. If Celeste sees them, she'll hurt Bernard," Amara said. "And if we go alone, she'll hurt all three of us." Amara studied the hearing aid in Gideon's hand. Then she remembered Evelyn's final words. "North light blinks twice" wasn't only a location. My father used that phrase when repairing faulty signal circuits. It meant the first signal was false and the second was real. So the clock is another decoy? Not exactly. It means there are two compartments. They drove toward Ashford Maritime while police followed several streets behind. The museum occupied an old shipping terminal beside the river. It was closed for renovation, leaving the enormous exhibition hall dark and empty. The front doors were unlocked. Inside, Bernard was tied to a chair beneath the harbor clock. Blood ran from a cut above his eyebrow, but he was conscious. Celeste stood on the clock's maintenance platform with a fuel can at her feet. "You came home early and ruined everything," she told Gideon. "No," he replied. "I came home in time to see who you really are." Celeste pointed a flare gun at Amara. "Open the clock." Amara climbed the narrow ladder. Behind the clock face, dozens of gears moved in slow rhythm. She found a brass cylinder marked with two painted lights. The first light pointed north. She opened its compartment and removed a black memory cartridge. Celeste smiled. "Throw it down." Amara examined the cartridge. A tiny letter E had been scratched into its surface, her father's signature mark. She dropped it. Celeste crushed it beneath her heel, poured fuel over the broken pieces, and fired the flare. Flames spread across the platform. "You destroyed 12 years of lies," Gideon said. "No," Amara replied, staring at the clock. "She destroyed the first signal." Celeste's smile vanished. Behind Amara, the north-facing light blinked once, went dark, and then blinked a second time. A hidden panel opened inside the clock. But instead of another memory cylinder, it revealed a small monitor already playing footage from Julian's boat. In the recording, a younger Celeste stood behind Julian near the railing. Then she pushed him into the black water. Bernard gasped. Gideon stared at his wife's recorded face, but Amara saw something even more disturbing. A second woman appeared in the footage. It was Gideon's mother, Evelyn, holding a weapon over Elias Quinn's body. Gideon stared at the monitor. In the footage, Evelyn stood above Elias Quinn with a weapon in her trembling hands. Julian was already in the water, and Celeste was pointing toward him, screaming something the silent recording could not capture. "My mother killed Elias." Gideon whispered. "No," Amara said. "Keep watching." Celeste raised the flare gun toward the monitor. Amara jumped from the platform as the flare struck the clock. Flames burst across its wooden frame, swallowing the screen. Gideon pulled Amara away while burning gears crashed onto the floor. Celeste climbed down the opposite ladder and ran toward the exit. "Bernard!" Amara shouted. Smoke spread rapidly through the exhibition hall. Gideon covered his face and rushed toward the gardener, but a flaming beam fell between them. Amara seized a fire extinguisher from the wall and cleared a path through the flames. Gideon reached Bernard, untied his wrists, and carried him away from the burning clock. Celeste had nearly reached the doors when police vehicles surrounded the building. She turned back and lifted the flare gun. "Stay away from me." An officer ordered her to drop it. Instead, Celeste aimed at Amara. Gideon stepped in front of her. Celeste hesitated for 1 second, long enough for Bernard to strike her wrist with the wooden arm of the broken chair. The flare gun dropped. 2 officers rushed forward and forced Celeste to the floor. "You fools," she screamed. "The only recording is burning." Amara looked toward the clock. The monitor had been destroyed, and the second compartment was hidden beneath flames. Then a calm voice came from the museum speakers. "Upload complete." Celeste stopped struggling. Amara turned toward the security booth above the hall. A green transmission light flashed through the smoke. "My father designed harbor emergency systems," Amara said. "He would never keep evidence in only one place." The second blink had not merely opened the compartment. It had activated a transmitter inside the clock. The recording had been automatically copied to Ashford Maritime's protected server and sent to Gideon's attorney. Firefighters entered the museum and extinguished the flames. Paramedics treated Bernard while Gideon, Amara, and the investigators watched the complete footage on a police tablet. The recording included sound. Julian's voice came first. "You sabotaged the company accounts, Celeste. Tomorrow, I'm telling Gideon everything." Celeste moved behind him. "You won't see tomorrow." She pushed him over the railing. Elias Quinn rushed onto the deck and threw a life ring toward Julian. Victor attacked Elias from behind with a metal tool. Evelyn appeared seconds later and grabbed Victor's fallen weapon before he could strike again. She pointed it at him and ordered him to stop. The image that had looked like Evelyn standing over Elias was only one frozen moment taken out of context. Elias was still alive. He reached the radio and shouted the coordinates of the boat, but Celeste tore the microphone from his hand. Victor then steered toward Blackwater Point while Celeste threatened Evelyn. The final minutes showed Elias slipping the navigation system's memory cylinder into his work bag before helping Evelyn escape in an emergency raft. He had saved her life. He had also survived long enough to protect the truth. Amara covered her mouth as tears rolled down her face. For 12 years, the world had called her father a drunk, a coward, and a murderer. The recording proved he had been the bravest person on that boat. Celeste watched from the floor, her wrists handcuffed behind her. "You married me because you were searching for this," Gideon said. She gave him a cold smile. "I married you because your brother left me no choice. If that recording surfaced, I needed control of the family before it did. You kept my mother imprisoned." She wouldn't stop looking for Elias's daughter. Amara finally understood. Evelyn had discovered her identity months earlier. She had arranged for Amara to be hired at the mansion, hoping to reach Gideon through her. But Celeste intercepted the plan and kept Amara close so she could watch her. Celeste's decision had ultimately brought the truth directly into Gideon's home. "You could have left Amara alone," Gideon said. "She found the hearing aid," Celeste replied. "After that, she became a risk." "No," Amara said. "I became a witness." Celeste was taken away. Victor initially refused to cooperate, but after investigators recovered the financial records for Bellwether Recovery Services and matched his voice to the boat recording, he confessed. He admitted helping Celeste move Evelyn between private facilities, causing Elias's fatal crash, and attempting to destroy the evidence. Celeste was charged with Julian's murder, Elias Quinn's murder, Evelyn's kidnapping, attempted murder, unlawful imprisonment, and conspiracy. Victor faced the same major charges. 3 weeks later, Evelyn returned to the Ashford mansion, not as a hidden patient, but as its honored owner. Her health improved once the sedatives Celeste had forced on her left her system. The first person she asked to see was Amara. "I should have found you sooner," Evelyn said. "You found me when the truth was ready to be heard," Amara replied. Gideon publicly cleared Elias Quinn's name. Ashford Maritime issued a formal apology to Amara's family and restored every employment benefit that had been taken from Elias after his death. The company renamed its harbor safety center the Elias Quinn Maritime Rescue Institute. Gideon offered Amara enough money to leave domestic work forever, but she declined a private payment. "Use it to protect workers whose voices are ignored," she told him. Together, they created an independent foundation that provided legal help to employees falsely blamed for corporate crimes. Amara became its first director. Months later, Celeste was convicted on every major charge. When the judge asked whether Amara wished to speak, she stood without anger. "My father died with the world believing a lie," she said. "Today, that lie ends. Justice cannot return the years stolen from us, but it can return a person's name." Evelyn reached for her hand. Outside the courthouse, Gideon apologized for failing to see what had been happening inside his own home. Amara looked at him calmly. "Coming home early exposed the truth. What matters now is that you never look away again." He promised he wouldn't. And in the rebuilt Maritime Museum, the restored harbor clock rang twice every afternoon, once for Julian Ashford, and once for Elias Quinn, the man who had risked everything to save the truth.